Hey everyone, I am so excited about today's video because I am going to share with you 8 of my favorite classes of veggies to plant in my fall garden. Now before I get started, my name is Lula and I live in Zone 8. The first class of veggies I am going to be planting are going to be my brassicas. And those are going to be my collards, my cauliflower, my cabbage, my broccoli, my Brussels sprouts, my bok choy. I'm going to be planting kohlrabi, mustard, and kale. Whew, that's a lot, right? In Zone 8, our first estimated frost date is going to be November the 11th. So I really want to make sure that I get these crops in the ground at least 6 to 8 weeks before our first estimated frost. But I like to do mine a little bit differently in that I like to get them started just a little bit earlier. That way they can get established in their new homes and get some growth under their belts before the cool weather comes. Now, brassicas are cool weather crops. They really thrive and grow well in the cool weather. However, as the days get shorter and the temperatures get a little cooler, plants do kind of grow a little bit slower than they normally would. They do well and can tolerate a hard frost. Now, things like my cabbage, my kohlrabis, such as that, I really like to go on and harvest those before the frost comes because they really can't take a hard frost. Another thing I like about the brassicas is that they do get sweeter when the frost hits them. They are so easy to grow. All you have to do is make sure you maintain a good soil, which is really rich in aged compost and manure. You will not have any trouble growing your brassicas. One thing that I am going to be doing with my brassicas is, by it being warm as it is right now, because they really don't like a lot of heat in the summertime, is I am going to be putting some shade cloth over them. You could also use some floating row covers. You can plant them under the shade of some of the taller plants in your garden. That way they can have the semi-shade and semi-sun and still be able to flourish, but not really be withering from the scorching heat. So that's a good way to really pamper your brassicas while it's hot right now and while you're allowing them to get that growth on them. Second class of veggies I am going to be planting are going to be the root crops. So I am going to be planting rutabagas, that's a tongue twister, radishes, and turnips. Now, I like to plant the rutabagas, but I find that they really don't have them growing at some of the local nurseries. At least I've never found them at our local nurseries here. So I've been buying them online, the seeds, and then I start them from seeds and then transplant them into my garden. They have a different flavor, but they are similar in appearance to a turnip, but they are really, really good. I'm not really good with planting radishes direct sowing in the ground. I sowed about 30 radishes in my garden. I direct sowed them, and I only had like 2 of them that really germinated. So I really don't know what I'm doing wrong with the radishes, but I have never been able to really get them to grow from direct sowing. So what I've been doing is I have been planting the seeds in my seed trays, and then when they get a little bit bigger, then I just transplant them into my garden. So if you're having that issue like me, then start them from seeds in your seed trays and then transplant them into your garden. Now, the third class of veggies I am going to be planting in my garden for the fall are going to be the peas. Now, I like the sugar snap peas, the stringless ones, and last year I really missed the mark because I planted them, and by the time the peas were ready, almost ready to be harvested, the frost came and it killed them. So it's really tricky trying to, reach that time between planting them too early or planting them too late, because if you plant them too early, the heat, they don't really like a lot of heat and they may not survive. But there again, you could utilize the shade cloth, the floating row covers, and that might help. I am going to be planting for my 4th class of veggies, the potatoes. Now I am planting the red Norland first early potatoes. I call them first early potatoes because they are going to mature in 75 to 90 days. You are really harvesting them early. You're harvesting them before they actually mature. And because of this, your potatoes are going to be a little bit smaller than they normally would be. And the quantity of potatoes that you harvest may be a little bit scant. But if you didn't get a chance to plant potatoes in the spring, then this is a good chance to get you some potatoes in the fall, and that way you have some potatoes that could last you until the springtime when you'll start your next potato growing season. Now the 5th classes of veggies I'm going to be planting are going to be the onions, and that is going to include the leeks, the bunching onions, and then the onions, I call them the round onions that you see in the grocery store. So I didn't get a chance to really start my onions from seeds, so I went to my local nursery and bought some onions. Now I have no problem buying my veggies from my seedlings from my local nursery, and sometimes you get so busy you don't have time to start seeds. Sometimes you may not even want to start seeds. Some people really don't like starting seeds, and there's nothing wrong with that. So just utilize your local nursery. Now these are the candied onions. I bought some of those. I also bought some leeks here, and I really need to get these in the ground. And then I am going to buy some bunching onions. I really love the bunching onions because they are what you call a cut and come again vegetable, meaning that when you cut them, they will grow back and you'll come back and cut them again, and that way you have a constant supply of onions, of bunching onions. And what I like to do is cut them up like I want them to be, freeze them in my freezer, and that way when I need them I can just go in my freezer, take some out and use them in my dishes. Now you really don't need a lot of bunching onions because they are the cut and come again veggie. So you could get by, unless your family really uses a lot of bunching onions. You really don't need a lot of them. I have, well, these leeks, there's 4 in this seed tray, and the nursery where I get my bunching onions from, they usually sell them like 4 in a pack. So I will probably get about 8 of those 2 packs, and that will be enough onions for me to last me all through the winter and into the springtime. So I'm looking forward to planting my onions. Now the 6th class of veggies I'm going to be planting is going to be the lettuce. So I'm going to be planting arugula, romaine, butter crunch, and some loose leaf lettuce. Like the arugula with the romaine lettuce, the Paris Island, and normally I like to cover my lettuce with a floating row cover to protect them from any type of frost that may come. Now these lettuces can really last through some cold weather. You just have to kind of cover them up a little bit, give them some type of protection, and normally they do pretty good here in zone 8. Now number 7 is going to be the spinach, and the spinach is going to include the beets, it's going to include the Swiss chard, it's also going to include just the spinach. If you don't mark your Swiss chard and your beets, label them really well, you will get them mixed up because they look so much alike. Matter of fact, the only difference between the Swiss chard and the beets is that the Swiss chard doesn't have an edible root like the beets does. Now you can eat the leaves of your beets just like you would the Swiss chard because they are from the same family. Only thing, if I'm going to harvest the leaves from my beets, I like to at least let my beets get to be the size that I'm comfortable with, because once you start harvesting all those leaves from them, it can slow down the growth or even stop the growth of the beets. There's so many different ways you can cook the beets. I really like them because when you roast them in the oven, it seems like it brings out that sweetness, that flavor of the beets. So if you haven't ever tried the beets roasted in the oven, please give it a try. It is so absolutely delicious. Number 8 is the herb. I'm going to be planting some herbs for the fall, but the one herb that really blew me away this last fall was the cilantro. Now it really thrives in the wintertime. You can grow it in the spring, but once the weather starts getting hot, cilantro doesn't do so well. but mine did really well. It made it through some frost, not that many. I think maybe after a couple of frosts it started turning brown and it died out, but you can cover it up. Maybe you can extend it a little bit. So there you have it, 8 of my all-time favorite crops to plant in the fall. So let me know in the comment section below what you're going to be planting in your fall garden. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Stay safe, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.